Thank you, everyone, and welcome to the monthly Finance and Operations Community Meeting. I'm Casey Sklar, the liaison for the Finance and Operations Community, and I turn it over to you all to have a great time and a great session today.
Thank you, Casey. I'll lead off because I believe Karen told me to. I would have tossed it up to either Drake or Karen as the great leaders of this committee to lead it off. But this is the first of these types of meetings for us. We did not have an annual meeting this year because of COVID. And in lieu of that annual meeting, we thought it would be a great idea to have these meetings. And we're planning right now a series of 4 of these meetings, basically monthly meetings, to cover some important topics that we would otherwise have. Sorry, I'm smiling because Drake just did his other duties as assigned. To share some of that same information, have some of the same conversations we would otherwise have at the annual meeting. As this is the first one, it looks a little more intimate than our annual meeting would be. But if you find this meeting valuable, I would say go out, let folks know. We think it's a good way to get together and share information. However, if we find the opposite of that, so there's a lot of pressure on Laura here, if we find that these meetings are not that valuable, that's good input as well, and we can think of another format. With that, since we do have since it's a little bit more of an intimate meeting, I thought it'd be a good idea to start by doing introductions. We'll start with Casey. Oh, I'm sorry, Casey.
Oh, I think Casey.
She's over there. I will start with Jerry. I lost one person on my screen, so I was trying to pick out who that person was. But I will start. This is Jerry Wise. We have a number of people from the leadership team of the Finance and Operations Group on. I am one of those members as well. I'm currently the CFO of Newfields, formerly known to many people as the Indianapolis Museum of Art. But as we've transitioned to have a greater focus on our Botanic Garden and to make sure that people know that our campus contains not just an art museum, but a Botanic Garden as well as an art and nature park. We now, as a wraparound name, call ourselves Newfields, which includes the Indianapolis Museum of Art at Newfields, the Garden at Newfields, and the Virginia B. Fairbanks Art and Nature Park at Newfields, as well as a couple of other assets. I'll turn it over for a second for introductions to Laura McGrew, who's on the top left of my screen, who will be co-presenting today.
Hi, I'm Laura McGrew, and I'm the Senior Director for Guest Experience and Human Resources at Newfields. And I've been here about 15 years in the HR realm, and I got guest experience about 3 years ago.
Kathy?
My name is Kathy Gilder. I am currently serving as the CFO and VP of Operations at Huntsville Botanical Garden. I've been here, I don't know, since before dinosaurs are around, it seems like. 14 years? Drake understands that. And we are happy to be part of this conversation today.
Thank you, Kathy. Millie?
Oh, yeah. I go by Millie. I'm Yuhoy. That's my official name. So I work as a financial coordinator at the Arboretum at Penn State. I've been working there for 4.5 years. We are a young garden. Through last September. Thank you.
Karen?
I'm Karen Sickinga. I was the Associate Director at Mathai Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum until a couple of years ago, and I have since formed a consulting firm, the Huron River Group, and I'm the co-chair of this group. And so I'm eager, especially for you folks that aren't on the leadership team, for feedback about the time of the meeting and the content of the meeting, and anything else that you want to send my way. I'm happy to hear from everybody in our professional section.
Drake will, if you're available.
Yeah, I am. We do allow dogs on our campus. That's our most common question. As long as they're on a leash, but they're not allowed in the bonsai garden or the visitor center. So just so you know. But my name is Drake Fowler. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the North Carolina Arboretum. I really appreciate this group. I get a lot out of it. I've been the CFO here for over 5 years, and I seem to learn something new every time this group gets together. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
David?
You say me?
Yep.
Sorry, you had to wake me up. No, I'm just kidding. I'm David Betts. My day job is the Chief Administrative Officer at University of Michigan Mathi Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum. I am currently filling in as interim director since our director retired July 1st. We have Nichols Arboretum, as I said, and Mathi Botanical Gardens and 2 other natural areas that we manage for the university. And I guess I'm on the leadership team, and I'm disappointed with the rest that we weren't able to gather this spring. So looking forward to these sessions.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. Amy's next up on my screen.
I'm Amy Moore. I'm the Director of Finance at the Huntsville Botanical Garden. I work very closely with Kathy, and I've been there about 4.5 years. So I recognize several of you from when you were at our garden for a meeting. It's good to see you again. And we were looking forward to going to the meeting this year, but we were all signed up. Of course, we know what happens. So.
Absolutely. Stephanie?
I am the CFO at the Birmingham Botanical Gardens for the nonprofit side. And I didn't realize I beat Kathy. I've been there over 15 years. So you'd think that I'd know what Kathy knows about how to do my job by now, but I'm not sure about that. And I'm a little late because I was filtering garden benchmarking compensation reports, Casey, for for my boss, because we're trying to work into budgeting that normally we're almost finished with by now at this point in time. So I'm going to turn my video off because I'm standing in my kitchen because I'm late. So I'm listening, but I'm getting situated. So
thank you, Stephanie. And Beverly?
I'm Beverly Talepcheck. I'm the business director at the Dawes Arboretum in Newark, Ohio, and I've been at the Arboretum for 33 years. So half of those years I've been doing the business director position, but before then I started out in the gift shop and things like that and worked my way up.
Thank you, Beverly. And I didn't purposely skip you, Casey, but I didn't know if you want to do anything more. I know everybody knows Casey and all the great things he does for our industry. But if before I started, there were any other comments you wanted to make, Casey?
Shucks. I'm Casey Sklar. In my day job, I'm the executive director of the American Public Gardens Association. I have recently clocked 8 years officially in that role. During that time, I've just enjoyed serving all of you, and certainly available and can share with you some tips and tricks from our compensation benefits platform and our benchmarking platform. Many of you, depending on where you are in the continental United States, received some emails about our benchmarking platform today, encouraging you to add your data. And we certainly, as per a previous request from this group, are preparing some documentation to make you ever better ambassadors or strong armors for us to help get more and more people involved in the platform so that you guys have more and more data to use. So thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Casey. I will share my screen and we'll try to keep this pretty informal given the group size. That said, I think that some of the things that me and Laurel show are better shown on screen. I believe everybody can see that. Okay, perfect. I saw the nod to the head, which is good. As we go through this, I will admit that I did repurpose a presentation that I had given a little bit earlier this year to some other groups, but in looking at it, the way it's presented is still relevant specifically for this conversation and for this time. And I'll provide a little bit of updates on some of the items where the data might be a little bit earlier. But we did something similar to this for the Museum Directors Conference, where we were talking about the financial implications of COVID and how we were going to deal with those financial implications as well. In fact, you see, I didn't even change that first slide, which says AMD webinar. I apologize. Changed the first slide, but not the second slide. So this is going to be very much about how Newfields does financial and operational planning. I'll start out by saying, as we entered COVID, we probably entered COVID in a slightly better financial position than a lot of other cultural institutions and gardens out there. Given where we were, where our fiscal year is, which ends June 30th, we had gotten past winter lights, which is our single biggest revenue driver for the institution. We do about $3 million a year of gross revenue related to winter lights. So for about a 5-week period, 6-week period, we do about $3 million, which is currently our biggest. We have one thing coming out pretty soon in about a year, which will probably eclipse that. However, it's given that this really started in March, this new world, so to speak, we were in a position of having a strong winter lights, having a strong operation through that time, and so was in a good place to plan for this. But as I go through this, the way that Newfields plans also was very helpful as we entered the COVID environment. So there were some things we did just on the operational side. So I'm sure everybody on this call had to start working from home a lot more than they ever did before. Prior to COVID, we had an absolutely not policy to that. We said, nope, sorry, if you need to work remotely, too bad, we do all of our work on site. Very quickly, we realized that all of our financial operations can be done remotely, and we're all cloud-based. So even without VPN, for the majority of what we could do, we could do it. We could do all of what we needed to do remotely, and then some of the other things which needed VPN, we knew we could get over without doing that on a timely basis. We already had close communications with our banks, with our lenders, with our OCIO. So as we entered March, which was a very tenuous time for us because we have such a large endowment, about 50% of our operations are funded from our endowment. On March 23rd, we saw was the date of the largest impairment to the equity markets, and we were very concerned about what that meant to our operations. However, we also saw a lot of federal programs coming out, and our relationship with our lenders and our banks was helpful in us getting to the front of the line when we thought those funds would be limited. We have a very active board, executive committee, investment committee. We have online platforms even before this to communicate with those groups. So we use online board software, and it was pretty easy to communicate with them online, to share materials. And we started to go to really almost a bi-weekly or monthly meeting with our board to keep them updated on what was happening. It was very helpful in allaying fears of the board that they understood that from an operations standpoint, we were in a good place, both financially and operationally, at least at that point for the short term. And then at the same time, we started to really do upgrades on our remote work capabilities. And like I said, we realized how much we could already do at home. And we started to do things like building a fatter pipeline into the building. So when people are getting on VPN, they don't see any work slowdown or things like that. There were a couple of other things for us. Liquidity was a big issue. Capital markets can close. They do close. I know that. I've been in capital markets now for close to 25 years and have seen a lot of stuff happen over that time. I remember when a smallish trades in foreign currency back in the late 90s came close to destroying our financial system. And we realized in this particular crisis that they can literally close, which means you cannot get your money. You can't trade. If you're looking to get money from your endowment to pay your bills, you might not be able to do that. You may not be able to draw money from your bank for a period of time, depending on the catastrophe. And you really need to plan for that from a liquidity standpoint in some way. Part of that is we were seeing discounted investments in March. So how do we make sure that, and this is an issue for anyone with investments, is that as we use our investments to pay for operations, you don't want to have to pay for operations at the bottom of a market, right? You don't want to sell securities that yesterday were worth $1 and today are worth 60 cents. You've just increased your costs. Your costs seem the same, but you've actually increased your costs by almost a factor of 2 in a scenario like that. So how do you minimize that need. And like I said, we had very close relationships with our bank and lenders. Do we need a credit facility? Do we need in the short term to borrow money so that we're not liquidating discounted investments? Ultimately, we did not need to do that, but that's always something that we do take a look at. And then we took a look at budgetary. So these were the three things. We looked at operations, we looked at liquidity and budgetary commitments. And can we meet, this was in March, can we meet our fiscal year 2020 budget if we're entirely closed for the next 3 months? Early on, we thought, oh, we'll be closed for 2 weeks. I'm sure everybody thought that, right? We'll be closed for 2 weeks and back. We're now closed more than 3 months, right? It's past June 30th. We are not doing any events on campus. We're open, but we're not doing any external events on campus through at least the end of this calendar year. So that's an additional 6 months of no events. We're seeing a very large impact on our budget, which I'll talk about for this year in just a second. Because then we said, well, what are the impacts on the fiscal year 21 budget? And for the purpose of keeping this presentation fairly tight, I'll say because this is usually a question, we budgeted fiscal year 2021 as if there was no COVID. So we knew there was COVID. We knew there was a likely impact. We had no idea what that impact was going to be. And rather than pretending we knew what that impact was going to be, we budgeted fiscal year 21 as if there was no COVID. And then you'll see a little bit later, immediately started making plans on what if there's an impact. At this point, we don't know what that impact is, but we know it can be as much as $3 million, which would be about 15%-ish, a little less than that, about 12% of our budget. We're hoping it's less than $3 million, but that's what we're planning for. So we're budgeting fiscal year 21 with no COVID. We know there's COVID that's happening. What we do a lot of is contingency planning ahead of this. So when this happened, there wasn't really a lot of stress on what is it we're going to do as a result of COVID and the associated downturn. We have contingency plan for organizational stress, whether that's a deterioration in endowment value, which was the big issue in March, no longer big issue, decrease in earned or contributed revenue, which is the big issue now, or an unexpected increase in expense, which will be the big issue coming up. We're likely to start seeing inflation in things that we care about in upcoming quarters. So things like healthcare, insurance, and other related things. We're likely to see that. Everyone's likely to see that. So how do you prepare for that? And below that is how we approach it. I'll probably skip through some slides as we go through this in the interest of time. But for me, this is important. We try to maximize our opportunity to conduct business as usual. So as we start talking about contingency planning, we try to be as precise as possible. So when we have something like COVID, if we have a $3 million impact, if that's 12%, we don't ask every department to cut 12%. That is not fair in any way we look at the world, because it's not fair to our public. It's the public we're serving. It's not our internal staff that we're serving when it comes to what our outputs are, right? Where we are always just serving our internal staff, but what we produce is for the public. And cutting 12% across the institution does not best serve our public. So how can we maximize our opportunity to conduct business as usual, even as we may need to make big reductions in expense? How do we do things that are not permanent and can be reversed, right? A lot of times when there's economic stress or financial stress and we start taking what I call a meat cleaver to the budget, we don't really differentiate between how do we, are these things reversible? Are these things long-term impact? Are these things totally irreversible? And when we do contingency planning, part of our philosophy is the first things we do are not meant to be permanent. And so we do a layered and precise approach, which I'll talk about to minimize those long-term impacts with a focus. And this is interesting in a downturn. We look at downturns as an opportunity to actually focus more on our continued growth and strategic plan. When there's not economic and financial stress, it's really easy to continue doing activities that are distracting to an organization, that are just continuations of things that we've done all the time. So how do we, even as we potentially are cutting, how do we focus on continued growth? How do we focus on the strategic plan and not cut things that will put us back on that? And the last thing is we try not to turn our employees into donors, is the way that I articulate this. Usually employment costs are somewhere between 50-60% or more of everybody's budget on this phone call and everybody's budget across this industry. So when you need to start cutting 12%, first thing you do is, well, let's take a look at our employment costs. We try to avoid that. We say that, you know, if our employees want to be donors, they would write the check. So let's take a look at what we can do that doesn't put the stress on the back of our employees. And I'll talk a little bit about that, what we mean by that as well. I'll skip over some of this stuff. Some of this stuff is more timely, but we took a look at everything, right? We take a look at federal intervention. We got a PPP loan of almost $3 million. I can say that all of our loans are public. So if you got a loan, if you want to see what loans everybody else got, go on the website. Ours was just under $3 million, which is great. There were a lot of other programs out there. We were making sure we were compliant and taking advantage of, not in the negative way, but making sure that we were not losing sight of opportunities for us to stay whole across all types of federal intervention. We, of course, look at expense control and cost recovery. If anyone is getting positive results on business interruption insurance, give me a call. If anyone's not getting results on insurance rebates, give me a call. So that's kind of where we were on that part. But also taking a look at our restricted grants, right? How do we recast those or use those slightly differently in this downturn environment? So we weren't seeing the restricted grants that were previously given to us go away, but there was an opportunity to make sure we could utilize those in a slightly different way, given the change in the world. We immediately put a stop to what we call all non-essential spending. So there wasn't even a question of, well, let's talk about what this means. We know what non-essential spending is, and I'll talk about a couple of the ones that we do, but two of the biggest things we did right away is we stopped hiring. So we did a hiring freeze immediately. We're still under a hiring freeze. We will be under a hiring freeze until the end of this calendar year. That's when we'll find out if our harvest season and our winter light season are big successes or big stresses. And we also stopped all travel. That became easier as all travel stopped nationwide and globally. But that was another big thing that we did, was stop those pieces. And as we stopped all public programs, we stopped all spending toward those public programs. If we're not going to do the public programs, there's a lot of infrastructure that we can stop doing as well. And then, of course, taking a look at all of our contracts and understanding force majeure clauses. I'm sure everyone here is very intimately now knowledgeable about their own force majeure clauses, but also having conversations with vendors that might not be covered under force majeure. There's usually a shared understanding. So there's certain vendors where we really didn't have an out clause, but in conversations, we're able to come to an understanding of eliminating expenses for us, given the environment. And, you know, and then after that is really taking a look at our budgetary commitments. And the big things we're doing right now, we've been doing it for a while, is reevaluating our small batch, high cost programs. So our goal as an organization is to impact as many people as possible. That's what we call service, right? We're providing service to the community. So as many people as we can serve, that's great. Well, just like a lot of institutions, probably everybody on this call and in the industry, we have a lot of these really fun programs that serve 10 people at a time and take a lot of staff resources and cost a lot of money, and we may even market them. Now's a good time to take a look at those, and we are taking a look at those, and we're continuing to have those discussions. But even post-COVID, there's likely to be a large reduction in those programs and starting to integrate those programs into our big seasonal programs. So rather than having a sidecar, say, greenhouse program over here that serves 10 people, how can we take those same resources, put it into something like Winter Lights or Harvest, and serve 1,000 people with those same resources using the investment we already have in our big programs? And then what are opportunities with donors and members? While there's stress on the organization at this point in time, and this is a little bit different when I first gave this presentation, the equity markets are doing great. If you're a high wealth individual, you are feeling fantastic right now. If you're a high income individual, chances are you are feeling fantastic. So most of our donors, which are within that kind of the 1%, the $500,000 and above annual income, and most of our donors, which are in the high net worth, this current environment that we're in is likely not having a negative impact on them and may even be having a positive impact on them. So are there opportunities for them, understanding the needs of the organization, to step up in their roles? here's where we were here's where we were in February 20, right? Prior to COVID. We had an operating margin that was about $1 million ahead of budget. At that time, we saw the S&P drop 35%. That was our big stress at the time. Here's what we thought our revenue risk was per month. I will tell you, as we finished fiscal year 20, our earned income was about $2.5 million below budget for the year. There was a lot of impacts that we did not necessarily expect. For instance, we had
Uh-oh.
Jerry has left us speechless.
Oh, okay, so it's not just me.
Jerry, you froze.
Frozen.
And it looks like we've lost Laura as well.
Did you?
Oh, I don't know. Laura, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I see.
Okay. Do you, I can always steal back the screen from Jerry, probably.
Yeah, because I don't have his presentation.
Yeah.
He's at home. I'm
Okay.
at the office.
Yes, there he is.
Oh,
Hi.
he's back.
I'm back, sorry.
You left us speechless.
I think that those were my guys internally who said, no, what are you guys doing?
It was the 10 minutes, Jerry. It's 10-minute presentation, remember?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? We'll just take some off of yours. It'll be okay. We're almost done here, I think. Let me see. Where are we? We're right there.
You were telling us about the massive bleeding.
The massive, let's just say the massive bleeding happened.
It's only a fresh wound.
It continues to happen. We need a tourniquet, but we're doing okay. So at the same time, on the expense side, we made a decision to continue to pay every one of our full-time staff and every one of our part-time staff, including our frontline employees, even if they were not reporting to work. So people who were selling tickets, taking tickets, selling retail stuff when we were doing none of that, we continue to pay all of those people as part of our commitment to our employees. However, like I said, we did a hiring freeze, no travel policy to that. I'll skip a little bit over this. This is our trend on our reliance on our endowment. Last year, we budgeted $549, even with what's happening this year. We're budgeting a $499 draw on our endowment, so 50 basis points, which is about $1.5 million difference for us. We, as an organization, started on a path about 7 years ago to reduce the reliance on the endowment, which means where we used to have, if we went back further, 75% of all of our operating spending came off of our endowment. For fiscal year 20, that number was headed toward 47%. We were coming off 55% in 19 and 47% in 20, meaning the rest comes from mainly earned income, but also some contributed income. Long-term, this is great because investment income is a lot more volatile than earned income, unless you have a pandemic. When you're closed, you go immediately 100% negative revenue. And so our strategy, which long-term helps the stability of the organization by diversifying our revenue, and this chart our board loves, during a pandemic, this has a very negative impact because you're so much more reliant on earned revenue at that point in time. So this is the crux of the presentation here, and I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but we changed the way we think about finances organizationally several years back. And where we used to have policies around endowment draw, investment policy, debt policy, how we do earned income strategy, and they all kind of lived independently, right? They were all fine policies, but they lived independently and never talked to each other. After years of conversation, changed the way we thought about that and said, our goal is financial sustainability. We know that. Everyone on this call says this is our goal, but we changed the way we think about policy. And we really have these 4 pillars. So when we think about our goal of financial sustainability, we have 4 interoperating policies for this. And I'll talk a little bit about the spending policy in a second, but our investment policy now feeds off our spending policy, which feeds off all of these other policies. But in addition, We also have bumper policies on all of these policies. So as an example, a spending policy works until you have economic and financial stress, unless you have a bumper policy to prevent that. A debt policy works great until you have a capital project that you want to do, in which case a capital project evaluation policy is helpful. So, so this is our basic framework. I'm happy to talk to anybody about this more in depth at any point in time, but it works very well for us. Part of what we've done on a budgetary side and taken out all the numbers is we don't do departmental budgets anymore. We do activity-based budgets. We've got about 25 programs and I apologize. I always say I'm going to spell focus correct, but I never do. But between revenue focused programs and non-rev programs, they each have their financial outcomes. Revenue focused programs need to improve every year on a net revenue basis. These are all cross-departmental, primarily programs. These all break out into, I forget, it's something like 160 or maybe 260 different project budgets that roll up into these programs. But this helps give us a line of sight on the performance of the organization, and it gets away from cross subsidies. So a lot of what we used to see on our revenue side is if Winter Lights outperforms, that means that, I'll pick on Laura, employee engagement can perform worse because I can just transfer money from this budget to this budget. With this line of sight, we don't do that. We say, no, if Winter Lights outperforms, great. And if employee engagement outperforms, great, right? They all should outperform. Every program owner here, and an individual owns every one of these programs, they're all there to outperform. So this helps on that budgeting side of the world. This is kind of how we take a look at it. So this is a bubble chart that shows the 3 of our programs, Spring, Winter, Lights, and Harvest through the years. Moving upward to the right is what you want to do, right? Serve more people, make more money per person coming on a net basis. We see that happening really with all of our programs. It's allowed us to change our endowment spending policy. So for folks who have an endowment on this call, it used to be 12-quarter rolling average, and you take 1% off of that, and that's what you do. And I could talk about this more to anyone who wants to, but we said that doesn't work. You spend too much when the market's going up, and you don't stop spending fast enough when the market goes down. So we got rid of 12-quarter rolling average. We use a point-in-time budget, and we use inflation. So whatever you spent last year from the endowment, you can spend that plus an inflationary rate the following year. It doesn't matter how much the market's outperformed. That's what you get to spend. There's a 6% cap on this. So do you use method 1 and method 2 just as have you reached the 6% cap, or can you use the inflation rate? As I said, I'm more than happy to talk about this. This is very different than a lot of organizations out there. This is part of what I would say is our ERM, our enterprise risk management. We take a look at, from an endowment standpoint, we have scenarios that says if we start at a certain endowment draw rate and we see a certain drop in our endowment value, are we okay with that? Are we concerned about that? Or do we have to take immediate action? Our goal is to get over to the right where we have a starting draw rate that's low enough that we don't have to worry about taking immediate action in almost any market scenario. But we do have our immediate action plan. So our contingency planning, and I know there's a lot of information in what seems like more than 10 minutes, is our ring of defense. And this is one representation of it. It's literally rings. So what this shows is based on various drops in our endowment rate or our endowment value. So if it's a 5% drop, 10% drop, 15% drop, 20% drop, 25% drop, what is the intervention that we take at each point in time, or the multiple interventions we take? In a chart, this is what it looks like. This is a list of a theoretical 17 discrete interventions. So if you saw our actual chart, there are 17 discrete interventions that we have that each have a dollar value associated with them, sometimes multiple scenarios for each intervention that says, here's what we do at anything from a 5% drop in endowment value to a 10% to 15, 20, 25, 30 and on. when I last presented this, we thought we would see a 15 to 25% drop in the endowment value. And so we highlighted in gray here these values for our board to say, here's what we're thinking of doing. Here are the interventions that we would take if we see this endowment value drop. This works for an endowment value drop, a revenue drop, any
Hey,
of those.
Jerry, can I give you just a time check? Because we've got 20 minutes left and
Oh, sure.
we want some time for discussion and also some time for Laura.
Yep. No, thank you. Thank you. I never look at the clock, and so that's always an issue. So we are at the end of this. You know, I would say this is within the ERM framework. I'm happy to talk about the RERM framework to anyone at any point in time. Our big questions right now are, will visitors return? Will donors be durable? I will say we just started putting our harvest tickets on sale, and we're seeing strong demand for that, so that's encouraging. But fiscal year 21 is still up in the air, and we are still monitoring that, I'm sure, like everybody else is here. So with that, I will stop sharing the screen. I will start sharing the microphone. And I'm happy to either take questions now or turn it over to Laura. And we can always invite Laura back. So I do know that there are two big topics here, and we thought we could squeeze it into one. And if we can't, that's okay with Laura. Perfect. Karen, would you like Laura to start?
Sorry, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Laura.
All righty.
Yeah.
I only really have 4 slides, so.
Good, because you really only have 4 minutes.
Good. So, oops, you guys can see that, right?
Yeah, and you can take it up with Jerry because he stole all your time. So
No worries. I'm used to it. So I was asked to speak to kind of staff morale and working from home and HR policies related. So first thing I have is that the New York Times in September did a quick little survey, but it's kind of interesting to see that 86% of people were satisfied with their remote work. And although parents were more stressed because of, you know, balancing childcare, they still are happy working from home. So I'm sure some of you have been finding this. I think most people do want to work in a more of a hybrid situation where they can come back in the office for some of the social aspects and maybe sometimes the equipment that they have at the office that they may not have at home. But they definitely are enjoying the time that they are having at home. The thing to think about though is that 6 in 10 American workers can't work from home. And I'm sure many of you in the gardens have that with all of your garden staff that have to be in, you know, to work on the gardens and security and on custodial and all of those. So anybody in service, healthcare, construction, etc. And it's also highly advantageous to our privileged white higher income workers, which obviously with everything going on with Black Lives Matter is something to really think about with staff as well. Let's see. There we go. So what we did was we threw together a pretty quick policy. We did have some people doing flexible work prior to COVID. We had some mothers that would come back after maternity leave and only do 4 days a week in the office, 1 day at home. But it wasn't really widely implemented across the organization, as I'm sure many of you had. So we quickly pulled together a work from home policy. And we implemented MS Teams for meetings and had IT do some quick training with people right from home. We made sure written work plans were submitted to supervisors and that expectations and accountability are outlined. That's the most important thing. And we were really strict on who could actually come into the office. A lot of people started trying to say they needed to come in for something or to work on curators wanted to work in with the research tools that they had here and things, and we said no, it really had to be essential staff. We implemented monthly all staff meetings, weekly senior leader updates, which were like a newsletter kind of a thing, and the director CEO every Friday sent out a little update to staff, which also included some humor. He has 2 cats, and he showed pictures of them, and you know, people really loved connecting with him in that way. Managers are encouraged to have weekly meetings with their staff to ensure connection, and part-time staff was the hardest because they really didn't have anything to do at home. They didn't have a lot of meetings to attend, so trying to keep them connected while they were at home was really important to us. We encourage breaks and spending time with their family, getting outside, reminding managers to tell people to kind of do a commute of some kind, like stop working at a certain point and then change your habit at home, like take a walk or do yoga or something to kind of make a break so that you were actually going home at that point instead of just sitting there in the same room as your computer. We did allow staff to arrange time to pick up some of their equipment if they needed an extra monitor at home or anything like that. And then, like Jerry said, we were paying them standard hours. Then in June, we reopened our garden, the museum in July. We started with only frontline teams and key personnel returning on site. Safety training was mandatory for all returning on site. The security director did walkthroughs. We have a daily home health screening process, which is actually through an electronic system. So they submit that every day and it goes to HR, and then a notice goes to their manager if they're approved to come into work or not. We activated mobile clock-in so that they wouldn't have to touch the time clocks. They could do it from their phones. And teams, we scheduled teams in groups so that they were always together. And had them stagger their work shifts and lunch breaks, and they had designated restrooms to use. Let's see. So engaging remote staff, it's really important to prioritize communication. They can quickly get out of the loop, like I said, especially part-timers. We encourage managers to listen for feelings of anxiety or being overwhelmed, and again, encouraging people to take some time off. Make sure there's very specific expectations about their projects and deadlines and hours that they're working. Be patient with them and understanding, especially with technology. Some of them had more issues than others. Working on, even doing Teams meetings or things. Make sure that you're continuing to recognize their good work and give them some fun things to do. We talked about things like doing little happy hours and things so that staff would feel like they were still part of the team, because that's really important. Encouraging work-life balance so that it doesn't become a 24/7 kind of a situation. And then making sure that you're always emphasizing the common goals and why we're doing the work we're doing and kind of what the future is of things is important for the staff. So we learned managers have to really think about the work that's getting completed, not the time spent, because everybody had different hours. We have parents that have children doing e-learning and needed to sit with them, and so they might be working nights and weekends to kind of make up some of that. You have to remember, salaried people have to be paid no matter what. So you have to make sure that you are not clocking their hours necessarily. Staff members that had productivity issues, those were highlighted a lot more. They seemed amplified from working from home. And so, that really made HR really have to step in and do more navigating of like a PIP process or corrective action. And then again, everything with the new legislation and the illnesses and FMLA and COVID really has added a lot of burdens to your HR teams. So you have to recognize that some of their regular projects may have gotten sidelined a little bit. Some staff have challenges with their home Wi-Fi and equipment. So in a ongoing policy, we are considering setting an amount for an equipment reimbursement if working from home. And what I've heard from my colleagues around is really $100 to $200 on average. Managers and staff want to continue working from home, but miss that social aspect. So you want to make sure that maybe there's some kind of a balance, and we're trying to figure that out now. If if we keep them home through the end of the year, which is kind of what we're planning, what do we want to do next year? Do we want to make it a 3-day work week kind of in the office and 2 days at home, or some kind of balance? We're requiring shift share for most of our management staff and any other staff that can kind of just shift their hours. So things like harvest and winter lights, which will help bring them in and help their morale, but not have them really in the building or in their offices, but actually just helping with the big initiatives. And we have to really think about winter and what's going to happen when there's less outdoor exercise and light, and how people may get really down, and making sure again that there's still that connection going on between the staff and the management. And then also thinking about on-site staff, the ones that did have to come in even through the months where we were closed, and they felt a little resentful that everybody else was at home and maybe being able to enjoy their families or whatever. And those people still had to come in and also were scared to come in because of COVID. And so kind of thinking about that, you know, of what you can do for the staff that are on site all the time. And I think that's all I had.
Sorry, guys, I keep having trouble finding my my mute button. So I just wanted to open it up for a few minutes for discussion and questions for Laura or for Jerry. I mean, that was a lot of material to cover very quickly. So I don't know if anybody had any questions or comments.
Or for us, what your guys are doing differently.
It was really good information, both of you. Thank you very much. And so, yes, filtering it through what our experience has been, and you know, everyone has a unique journey through this. Mm-hmm. Every organization and every individual in how they're juggling both their work and their home lives. You know, all the rules changed. So by being able to share what your journey has been within your organizations is very helpful. I see a lot of similarities, and I see differences. You know, we are not an organization that has those pesky investments to worry about, and so how we navigated through that earned revenue and contributed revenue was different. We also, because our geography is different, we were able to open sooner and engage in activities sooner. And so, like I say, everyone has a different story. And I think sharing these stories, I wish more people were on the call. I don't know if it's a timing thing or just that this group of finance and operations are incredibly busy people, particularly dealing with the challenges that we're all dealing with within the organization. So I don't, you know, how we could share this information and in our stories with each other more is, I think, an opportunity for the leadership committee to talk about.
Well, a couple of thoughts on that. One is we definitely, Jerry and Laura, if you guys are willing to share your presentations, we could post them on the resources page on our F&O section, you know, discussion board. And then we can let people know, you know, for those who missed the discussion today, that the presentations are available. I also, at the virtual annual meeting that we had, I said that I was going to survey the community about what time would be the best time for these sessions, because this is an outcome of that meeting, that people said they wanted to have these opportunities to discuss and share ideas. But I kind of just said it's going to be 4 o'clock on Tuesdays instead of surveying them. So I could go is this not a good time for folks?
Maybe it's not the time. Maybe it's, you know, being so close to the end of the month, you know, or, you know, people in our arena. And it's just might be, I know personally, my emails from finance and operations still go into my clutter box. You know, I have to go search for them. despite trying to change those rules. And so it's just a matter of trying to engage very busy people in the APGA website and all the resources that are there for us as a professional community, and how we can beat that drum louder. We, when we invited everyone to come together in person, we're all like, yes.
Yeah, right.
But to take time out of part of your workday is probably harder than to take several days away devoted to this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think like we found some of our events, if you just start having them at a regular time, they do tend to just build steam.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if that might be the case with this. Like once they meet us, they find out how cool we are and they start showing up on a more regular basis.
For
That
sure.
might happen to you, Drake, but that never happens to me. Stephanie, what were you going to say?
Oh, I don't think I got a reminder that I saw once I logged on to APGA, but so Kathy, to your point about everybody needs reminders, but it was already on my calendar, and Drake knows how I am about this. I was on a countdown until this meeting, so I knew it was happening. And I think Drake's probably right about just getting in the habit. It might not be that we move it around. It may be that we have built it, you have built it, and they will come. But a dumb question. So I know this session's being recorded. Is it, you were talking about posting Jerry's presentation. Well, since it's already being recorded, do we have access to it?
So we will have access to the recording, and then we will be able to post the recording. But that usually takes a couple of days. It's not an instant process.
Well, I don't need it tomorrow, but Jerry, you had some really valuable stuff as we would be further along with budgeting now, but pandemic and uncertainty, and you had some great points, even about your small batch, about maximizing who you are able to serve and things like that. When I could see my organization as you were talking about what this is the time, and we already know it's the time to make some decisions and some reworks, but I was going to have my ED sit down and watch your presentation with me. And we know we're going to do this very differently, where we've sort of done it from each department, and also like the activity versus department. Each department sort of does it from a micro, and then we pull it up into the big wheel and see what happens when we spin it all together. And we already knew it was going to be from a more macro level and a little bit more top down this year. So thank you. Wise words.
So to speak.
Thank you for the pun. Also, Stephanie, on that specific thing, if you're interested, we have a rubric that came out of that resulted in more cross-functional look at programs. And I'm happy to talk with you about that too, because you're right, the process that we went through and are going through with those programs is as important as what we want the outcome to be, because you're very devoted, for good reason, owners of those programs, and there's justification for every single one of them. But how do you align for the outcome that's best for the organization?
I bet the whole professional section, the F&O section, I bet they'd all like to see the rubric, because that's the kind of people that they are. So if you're willing to share that too, I suspect everybody would like to see that.
So Jerry, here's the note I wrote down. As soon as we get done with our budget season, which is we're in the midst of, drive to Newfields to take an inordinate amount of Jerry's time to find out more about all the things I was writing down.
That sounds good. And by the way, if anybody wants to come in the month of October, our new Harvest Nights program has started this year, which I'm sure everybody has or I don't want to say I'm sure everyone does. I'm sure many people have a Harvest Nighttime program, but it's our first year. It's pretty interesting. And different than some, similar to some, but we think it's exciting, and be happy to show folks what we're doing to show our garden in a slightly different way.
Yeah, I'm on your website now, and this looks fabulous.
So for the next time we do this next month, and I think David, you're going to be the moderator next month. Did you guys like this proportion of presentation to discussion, or would you prefer, I mean, you few people that aren't on the leadership team, do you have feedback about this session? Should we make time to do a deeper dive into this stuff? Or I mean, what do you think, Amy, Stephanie, Beverly? What would you recommend to us?
I really enjoyed the presentation. Like Kathy said, I learned a lot. Jerry gave a great presentation. I can see a lot of the things that we're doing, everybody's doing. So, and actually September 30th is the end of our budget year. So that's why I'm going to have to jump off of here. I'm going to have to go get some audit work getting going. But I really did enjoy this session. I learned a lot.
In Laura's information, I would have liked to, dive into more as well. So combining two topics into one probably is
too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to totally give Laura's presentation to my staff to just talk about, staff care, and some of those points that you made were very good.
Yeah.
And I just want to put a plug in for next month. The topic that at least we have slated is really looking at how have we moved digitally with events, and how have we engaged our stakeholders. And so if you guys have ideas, please let me know. I think Drake, you've got some that we wanted to share about events and really who has been successful with earned revenue approaches and able to make a little money during all this time, as well as just kept people connected. So that's going to be those two sides of it. So if you've got ideas or seen some folks that have done some things well, let me know so we can include them in the conversation.
Great. Well, with that, I think we're a couple minutes over, but I do thank Jerry and Laura. You guys gave great presentations. I greatly enjoyed both of them. It was a lot of information kind of compressed into a very short period of time. So thank you both. And I look forward to seeing everybody at the end of October.
Sounds good.
Thank you all for putting this together.